My name's Dave. I'm an alcoholic. I've been through the process with the help of a Big Book Step Study sponsor. I try to practice these principles on a daily basis to the best of my willingness. Grateful to be here this morning. There's always a little bit of anxiety that comes with this seat. Fortunately, not nearly as much anxiety as there was when I first finished the work. Just to give a little background, I went to my first AA meeting when I was 16. Wasn't ready. Came back to AA when I was 19. Wasn't ready. Popped into AA for about a week when I was 30. Wasn't ready. And when I say wasn't ready, I guess what I mean by that is that I wasn't miserable enough to be willing to do all of the things that are necessary to recover. All the other times that I went into AA, I treated AA basically like a support group. I'd come into the rooms, I'd complain about all the people in my life that were making me miserable, and that was really about it. And when I came back this time, I stumbled into this room, my third day sober, and I heard something very different here that I just hadn't heard in any other AA meeting that I'd been to. It was the first time that I really had hope that AA could work for me. For whatever reason, all those other times that I was in AA, I never felt like there was a clear plan. It was, don't drink, go to meetings, and you better find a higher power. Like, how do you do that? I come from a background where, I don't think prior to this I had ever had a discussion with anybody about God. I didn't know anybody who prayed, and so like that, you just have to do God's will and you have to find a higher power. Like, it was like I was supposed to just somehow get it through osmosis and going to an AA meeting, and it just didn't work. So when I came into this hall, it seemed like there were clear-cut directions. If I do these things, as a result of doing these things, I'll develop a relationship with a higher power, and I will solve my problem. And that has been the case for me. When I was going through it, I definitely lacked confidence that plan was actually going to work. But again, I was so desperate that I was willing to do anything that anybody in AA told me to do. I had really spent the better part of a decade trying to figure out a way to get sober that didn't involve AA, because of my prior experiences and the continued failure for me. It's the process has been just absolutely life-changing for me. Really starting with that fourth step, doing the inventory. Through my writing, I came to realize that I had, just this awful plan for life. Basically, I wanted all of you to do what I want. That was the only way that I was going to be happy. If you didn't do what I want, even though I had never expressed what I wanted, but if you didn't do it, then I was upset. So, I am miserable. Everybody that I ever met pretty much was on my fourth step list. A lot of people in this room were on my fourth step list. I just went through life that way, and had no idea, why life was awful. It was really through doing that I had that realization that, the life was awful because of the way that I dealt with it, and the way that I looked at it and how my interactions with everybody was. The fourth step was, is a key piece of step 10 for me. Writing all of those resentments out over and over and over, really prepared me to be able to do this step. On page 84, I have circled. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. And, I've come to realize that there's no finish line with this step. I think before I started doing the work, I thought, I'm going to just bang them out 1 through 12. I'll be good. I'll go to a couple meetings here and there and, just to make some appearances and life will be grand. I have learned that, I have to continue to work at this. This is not something that I'm ever going to perfect, but, I want to just kind of keep trying to move in that direction with, that being, I say that being the goal, but, with the knowledge, like I'm never getting there. I'm never going to be perfect at this. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And it says to continue to watch for this, which leads me to believe that this is going to continue to happen. And it does. I had a resentment towards my wife a couple weeks ago. And it was, it caught me off guard, it started via text. Like, for me is just the worst way to have any sort of real conversation with anybody is text. And, I said a reply that, in the moment I thought there was nothing wrong with it. And I could immediately tell by her reply to my reply that it did not hit the way that I had hoped. And, and then in, my mind, my ego just takes over, and I was, well, like, I don't understand how you can be mad at me. Like, what I'm saying is completely justified. And I get home and from work and, we're hanging out in the kitchen and, the rest of the night, like, I'm irritated that she's irritated. I'm doing what I love to do. I'm subtly punishing her. She knows. I'm sure. I'm making sure that she knows that I'm annoyed. I'm not enough of an adult to actually just have a conversation and say how I feel and just put it all out on the table and resolve it. So it's not until really the next day where I reach out to my sponsor, which, I don't do enough in these situations. I reached out to my sponsor. I wrote out the resentment. I sent it to him. We talked about it, and and it was done, and it was gone. And, and for me, that's the beauty of this process, because when I came in and I did that 4th step, there were people on there that I had resentments on again since I was 10, 12 years old. 30 years I walked around, just having this ill feeling every time that person's name was brought up or when that person popped into my head. And being able to have a solution to this is, just everything for me. And unfortunately, it's not as simple as that for me. Just because I have a solution doesn't mean that I'm always going to go to that solution. I've determined that there are definitely times where I don't look at these things because I don't want to be wrong. And when I look at them, and I look at my part in them, I have that realization that, what I did probably wasn't the right thing. And, so if I don't look at that, then I don't have to feel that way. But at the same time, I know that that it solves the problem, which is, just such an indication of just how screwed up my head is. There's so much of this stuff that, while I know it works, it's just still not reflex to me. I still, it's still sometimes just a grind to decide to do what I need to do to make me feel better or make somebody else feel better. And with this one in particular, it was just, it was amazing how quickly it was gone. And to be able to examine my behavior, which, is something that I never did for the better part of 40 years of my life. And, and to be able to examine it and see where I was wrong and, and hopefully learn from that. obviously every situation is very unique, and it's not necessarily something that, that clearly translates from one situation to the other. But in some ways it kind of does, because all my shit's the same shit. It's the same thing over and over and over with different people involved, and in this case, it was, the whole thing was about, our daughter and something that she wanted, and, that was something that I really didn't want to happen. And, she had just gone through a very, very traumatic situation, and there was no thought about her. There was just, how does this affect me? Like, how, what about me? And, which is generally the case for me. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. I speak to a therapist a couple times a month, and, throughout everything that's been going on at home recently, we were talking about it, and he said, well, how are you doing with the drinking? And, I almost just laughed, like, that's not an issue. Like, that's, it wasn't like through everything that, that's gone on, and, through all the situations since I've done this work, like, that's just not a thought. Like, it's, and that is such a miracle for me, because, that was the thought that ruled every single day of my life. It was, whenever I wasn't drunk or high, the entire thought process was, well, how am I going to get there? Like, when am I up next? What's the plan? And, and to have it be, something that's just so foreign to me, and something that I just don't think about at all, is such a gift. Probably one of the greatest gifts that I've got in this program. And I try to, as best I can, extend the cease fighting anyone. It's, the alcohol part's easy, the anyone part is not easy. I've learned a lot in regards to, what's my business and what's not my business, and that's what I have to look at in a lot of these situations. And 9 out of 10 times, the right answer for me is to just shut up, and not say anything, because it's generally not my business. And, I have to fight that ego, because, my head tells me that I want to win in all situations. I want to be right. I want you to tell me that I'm right. And it's, it just, I was talking to somebody before the meeting this morning about, that first thought that comes into your head. And I was referencing the Seinfeld episode where George Costanza had decided that he was basically going to do the opposite of everything he thought that he should do. And that's, I was joking about like, that's, really, for me, that'd probably be the best outcome. If I just go against my initial instinct in every single situation, I'd say 75% of the time I'm probably going to be good. But, I have such better relationships with people as a result of this. I think in particular about the relationship with my mother. When I got sober, me and my mother were just like this, constantly. She would send me like these scathing texts and emails, like, 5,000-word emails at like 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I'd wake up to it. And, and now my mother, basically tells anybody who listens that, I'm her greatest supporter, that I do, that I'm there for her more than anybody else in her world. And, and that's such an amazing thing for me to have. So it says, what we have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. I have to do work every day. I have to start my day with prayer. Throughout my sobriety, I've, continued to add different pieces into that from people that I've heard in these rooms. What started from, just God help keep me sober for the day. Me praying in my bathroom with the closet door closed so nobody can see me, now is, very extensive with lots of prayers and lots of things. And, just the other day, my sponsor had suggested that I begin to ask for acceptance, and that's something that I've been doing on a daily basis with the rest of it for the last couple of weeks, and it's definitely helped a lot. I love these meetings in particular, because it's just so focused specifically on the step each week, and I just get so much good information from all of you, for things that I want to implement in my life. And there's so many people in here that have done the work that just seem to have such a great perspective on life, and and that's what I'm constantly striving for. I'm just trying to always be better. It's just it's so foreign to how I live. Like there was never any thought about that. Like I never it just wasn't anything that I learned to do. I didn't know anybody who did this. I thought you just kind of did your thing and went along, and anyone who didn't like it, well, tough shit. That's their issue. And I've come to learn through this that that's not the way that I want to behave. And and this is why I was not leaving my house for days and days at a time, sitting by myself, smoking pot or drinking, and just this miserable existence, because of how I treated people, and and because of the fact that I never had any thought about anybody else. And if you're thinking about doing this work, or you're in the middle of this work and you're stuck, my suggestion is just, even if you don't know whether or not it's going to work, even if you don't understand how or why it's going to work, even if you hate it, just finish. The time that I've been here, I've never seen anybody that has done the work that said, well, that was a waste of time. It's worked for everyone that I've seen that's done it, and it's changed everybody's life, and it's changed mine so dramatically that, when I got sober, if, on that day I could have, written out what my dream of what my life would be, it wouldn't even come close to what I have. And, and that's, the result of this work, doing these steps, creating a relationship with God as a result of doing these steps, and continuing to work on things and go to these meetings and just keep learning from all of you. Thanks.